Okay. We're recording. Hi, it's nice to be here. It's a Saturday morning, bright and early. Perfect for a conversation with somebody who is an early bird, Gord Magill. I will introduce Gord. Gord is a third generation trucker from Hamilton, Ontario. If I get anything wrong, please interrupt me. Um, I don't know your story as well as you do, obviously. His grandfather came home from World War II and went into trucking. His father and uncles followed. Gord got his license the day he turned 18 and spent 30 years on the road across four countries, ice roads in Canada's Northwest Territories, road trains in Australia, logging runs in New Zealand, and he's now at the ripe old age of 47, an American citizen living in Ithaca with his wife and two daughters. In January of 2022, he drove to Ottawa to welcome the Freedom Convoy. He wrote about what he saw for Newsweek, and his new book, End of the Road Inside the War on Truckers, is out now from Creed and Culture Books. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me,
Thank
Gord.
you. Thank you, Natalia. Only one minor correction. I
Yeah.
have not yet become an American citizen.
Oh,
I am mid naturalization process. Um,
Okay. Well,
but
we will
I
welcome you.
thanks. Yeah, I've been living here for basically 10 years. I got my green card in 2016 when my wife and I came back to North America from living and working in Australia and doing some travels in other parts of the world. And yeah, I sort of started trucking here, and you are correct. And during the dark times of COVID, I went home to express solidarity with my fellow Canadians and fellow truck drivers who led the charge to try and save Canada from the wicked and pernicious and capricious COVID regime of Justin Trudeau. And I've sort of been writing about it and defending those guys ever since.
Um, so here in the United States, I mean, I know you wrote for Newsweek and there were selected articles, but for the most part, if I mentioned the trucker convoy, I think people's eyes would glaze over and they have no idea. It was really not reported except, in alternative media. So, can you start at the beginning and just tell us what happened and what the trucker convoy is and was?
Right. So I'm going to assume most of your audience remember hasn't totally, deep sixed or black holed their memories of COVID and everything that happened during that time.
Yeah.
Um, or memory hold, I guess, is the term. It was bad in Canada. I mean, it was bad in a lot of parts of the United States, but it was worse back home. And I did travel home during the troubles because, I mean, the border wasn't completely closed and they had to let me in because I am a Canadian citizen. So I went back a few times before the Freedom Convoy took place and saw how utterly ridiculous and nonsensical the impositions in Canada were. And that's coming from New York State, which is to say something, right? Because they were pretty ridiculous here. And I when I heard about the Freedom Convoy, I felt very, very strongly about what I was hearing, and that these guys needed, every last voice. So, uh, one of the really depraved things that Justin Trudeau had done in Canada was he, over and above publicly using really vile rhetoric to describe COVID dissenters. Um, calling anybody that disagreed with his policies racists and homophobes, and should we tolerate these people? He actually enacted legislation that like actively discriminated against us, and in fact, like in Canada, any federally regulated area of life, you are subject to having to show a vaccination card. You are not allowed to travel. So basically, like, no getting on airplanes, not allowed in airports, that's not allowed on trains, because you chose to manage your own health concerns yourself. And I have a friend back home who travels a lot for business, and then basically that was over, so he couldn't fly anywhere. And Canada's a big country, 6 time zones. It's larger than the United States. um, if you are if you're let's say you're a native person that lives in the far north of the country and you need some kind of specialist medical care in Toronto or Winnipeg or Vancouver or somewhere in the south, That means taking an airplane to go and get that specialty medical care. And if you didn't take the juice, you were not getting on the plane. So this is the kind of crap that Justin Trudeau put on the country. Never mind the sort of like deep psychological problems that the entire sort of regime had created, separating families. I have members of my family that still haven't talked to me in like 6 years, because I chose I never hectored anyone. I didn't get on Facebook. I didn't get in any of these debates about pro or anti-vax. I'm like, you do you, I'll do me. We'll all get along. As you and your listeners know, that's only ever a one-way street. The people that will let you do your own thing are never get that back in return. And we saw this in spades during COVID, and it affected people very deeply. So it got really, really bad. And in November of 2021, the federal government in Canada and Joe Biden and his administration began discussing mandating vaccines for cross-border truckers. The thing is if you're a truck driver, if you're not a truck driver and you don't understand how the industry functions and you don't understand how it functions during COVID, you might not understand how utterly ridiculous and unnecessary this was. Truck drivers lead solitary lives and don't often interact with anybody. They sit in the cabs of their trucks most of the day. Yes, maybe at the truck stop, maybe at a rest area, maybe at some facility where you get loaded. But during COVID, most of those places were closed. And then when truck drivers would, go to the mill to pick up a load of toilet paper, the personnel at the mill wouldn't let people in their trucks. Just back your trailer into this door. Don't come in for your paperwork. Don't do anything. We're doing it all electronically. You're not allowed to use our washroom facilities. Stay in your truck. So during COVID, there's less opportunity to interact with the public than ever. Truck stops are closed or reduced hours or wouldn't let drivers in. Rest areas on the highway were often closed. Very famously, the Pennsylvania Turnpike and all the rest areas on other highways in PA were closed by their governor. And you got treated like a leper everywhere you went, right? Also, on top of the fact that the government in both countries issued what are called HOS waivers. So truck drivers normally work 60 to 70 hours a week to begin with, as standard operating procedure. We all work like twice as, like 50% more hours than the average person, often more. And the government's like, well, there's a national emergency and we have to keep the supply chains moving. So here, if you're hauling COVID related goods, you can work 100 hours a week and we won't bother you. So truck drivers are tasked to work twice as hard as they normally do. No facilities, treated like a leper everywhere you go. And now, on top of it all, they're going to make you get a vaccine, even though you're not interacting with anybody and you lead a solitary life in your truck and you're working very hard to keep the economy going. So, none of it made any sense. So, in Canada, this sort of like spontaneous thing called a slow roll is, the idea came from a lady named Bridget Belton. It was her idea originally, like, hey, let's have a slow roll to Ottawa. We'll like drive all our trucks to Ottawa or down the 401 or whatever. We'll drive down some road nice and slow as like a protest action. That was the sort of, seed of what later became the Freedom Convoy. A number of people across the country glommed onto it. Social media, it
Sorry,
just
where were they driving from?
well, originally Bridget's from Ontario, but the idea was that like any truck driver that wanted to participate, just do a slow roll wherever you're at. Just go get
Okay.
you and your friends together, get out on the highway, drive slow, block traffic, let your concerns be heard. And over time, this this idea grew and spread, and a bunch of truckers in BC, a bunch of truckers in Alberta, and then later all across the country all said, well, let's go to Ottawa. So it started to organize, in people's kitchens via Zoom meetings, and then they start talking about it on TikTok and social media. And it was like super viral, super spontaneous, super decentralized. There was no like central committee of the Freedom Convoy. There was no money directing anything. There was no money or donations until after it already started heading for Ottawa. Like it was basically out of people's pockets. And so in the end, 13 different convoys of trucks from all across the country went to the nation's capital. The one that came from Western Canada took a few days to drive across the country. And as they went, that's when you start seeing the videos online of like hundreds and thousands of people lining the sides of highways and on overpasses, waving that maple leaf flag, and everybody was supporting them. And then other local protests took place. There was one in Manitoba at the border crossing at Pembina, North Dakota, and Emerson, Manitoba. Another one started in Alberta. There was a couple other smaller ones across the country, and then another big one at the major border crossing between Detroit and Windsor. And that was the Freedom Convoy. They get into Ottawa. I was there that first weekend. There was like just thousands of people all over the Capitol at Parliament Hill. All these trucks like come downtown, parked all over the city, and they sort of settled in. And it was a 3 week long protest, totally peaceful. Um, the media immediately started saying things about the convoy that were just scandalously untrue. Oh, the convoy's like stealing food from a soup kitchen. They're harassing people in the streets. They lit an apartment building on fire. They did this. They're peeing on statues downtown. All of this stuff was later proven to be totally bogus and untrue. Um, Everybody remembers that after 3 weeks of the protest, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked something called the Emergencies Act, which is secondary legislation after something much older called the War Measures Act, which is, only millimeters away from being what is essentially martial law, used to clear out what was at that time the largest peaceful protest in Canadian history. As part of that legislation, there's an inquest into it because it's considered so severe. That's an automatic inquest. You invoke this, you have to have an inquest later. During that inquest, it was found that all the things the government was saying about the convoy were untrue. All the things that were being said about the convoy in the media were untrue. It was called the Public Order Emergency Commission. A sergeant for the Ontario Provincial Police, I shouldn't say a sergeant, the director of intelligence for the Ontario Provincial Police, who is like a key player in managing the security of Ottawa and trying to figure out the convoy, told the POEC the media and the government lying about things made it very difficult for them to do their jobs, right? Because now the truckers are like annoyed at the cops, and anybody that could go outside, anybody that was at the convoy, right? And I was there, could see that it was just people running around and hugging each other, and everybody's waving flags and signs and just saying, "Hey, Trudeau, come talk to us." For the American listeners, Prime Minister Trudeau, uh, within like hours of the convoy coming to town, left Ottawa. He went and hid away at a cabin in the woods in Quebec somewhere for several days. You know, like he memed himself into believing that the truckers were going to like storm his house and come and attack him or something. Because what was found out at the Public Order Emergency Commission is that the Canadian government, members of the Canadian government, and the media were collaborating to set a narrative, and they started calling it January 6th North. Before the truckers even got to Ottawa, they were already starting this media campaign to smear them and to compare it to the sort of voting protests against President Biden, and trying to imply that the truckers were all these violent fascists. Again, all of this stuff was disproven. And 3 weeks later, they crack down on the convoy, smash people's trucks, tow them away, beat protesters in the street. Very famously, a reporter from Canada named Alexandra Lavoie had a tear gas canister fired at her at point blank range. A Royal Canadian Mounted Police horse trampled an old Native lady in her wheelchair. They'd beat people, would throw them in vans, drive them 30 miles outside of Ottawa, drop them off in the cold. All kinds of really bad stuff happened. And the amount of violence or criminality engaged in by the convoy was zero. It's been proven. I don't know what to tell you.
No,
And
I mean it's the same thing as here, right? It's like as you're talking about this, I've been very involved in the whole, school closures, COVID scandal here, and the way they created the illusion of consensus around the pandemic playbook that they wrote. Jay Bhattacharya and other scientists were completely silenced, and Fauci, Collins, our heads of CDC, NAID were saying, basically as soon as the Great Barrington Declaration came out, which is what Jay Bhattacharya signed, they ordered a swift and devastating takedown. And this is all now documented in discovery from a federal case against Fauci and Collins and the federal government. So it seems very, very similar to what happened to you.
yeah, almost like this was orchestrated from somewhere else.
Where? Where could it have been orchestrated from? Well, I mean, I have my theories, but I'm curious if you have yours.
Well, so one of the things that I think a lot of Canadians don't know, and a lot of Americans, like basically no Americans know this because it was only, certain things go into the media and then they just kind of disappear and everybody tries to forget it if they read it at all, was that the American government was heavily involved in Trudeau's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act because they were demanding that the border crossings that had protests at them that were slowing down the movement of freight between the two countries be opened up because the delays were costing the automotive companies money because a lot of car parts are made in Canada, a lot of steel is made in Canada. All of that stuff is just in time delivery to factories throughout the Midwest and the South. And, they were losing some money. They probably wildly overestimated how much when they were complaining about this. And the thing that drives me wild is that, we had this like short protest that was only 3 weeks long that caused a little bit of, sure, there was some delays at the border, there was some delays to the production and the economy, but what about the shutdowns from COVID for 2 years and the destruction to the economy that created? No, 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 that's fine. We won't talk about that. But these poor truckers demanding their rights, their ability to work. Now, the trucker protest was not for we want special privileges, we want to everyone to stop the war in Israel or Palestine. We don't we insert usual leftoid protest here. All the truckers were saying is we would like to keep working, please. Right? Like this is not like some massive demand. It's just like leave us alone and let us keep working. That's it.
Right. I mean, working without having to comply with unjust federal mandates.
Correct.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there was a number of phone calls between the Biden and his people and the Canadian government. There
Mm.
was there it was revealed also that the banks were involved because obviously they one of the measures they undertook under the Emergencies Act was to freeze people's bank accounts. There was a number of communications between Trudeau's deputy prime minister Chrystia Freeland, where her and executives at Canada's banks were talking about labeling the truck drivers as terrorists without any evidence and just like freezing their bank accounts as a method to like get them to leave Ottawa. And at no point in this protest did the government say, "Hey, maybe we should talk to these folks." Nothing. No, no, no envoy. No, like Trudeau sending his underlings to the sort of leadership that did eventually develop around the Freedom Convoy. Because originally, again, spontaneously organized, no leadership. And I want to share something with your audience about a difference. Okay, and I'm not trying to be all political about right versus left here or whatever political party.
You could be political. I'm okay with that.
But I recently went to the Mid America Trucking Show in Louisville, Kentucky at the end of March. It's an annual truck show industry conference. It's like the biggest trucker party in America, and it's also like a serious get together. Lots of products, lots of discussion from regulatory agencies, corporate people, insurance, everybody involved in trucking is there. And the trucking industry in the United States has been going through convulsions since COVID because of a number of policies engaged in by the Biden administration, which built on other policies that were changed before him. And it's all grown into a big old mess that involves holes in the regulatory system mixed in with mass migration,
Yeah.
mixed in with just corruption with issue of CDLs. And now we're seeing this humongous spike in collisions and crashes on the highways, innocent people being killed. Thousands of American trucking companies have gone out of business because they're competing with foreign gangster operated trucking companies who are using their own people as basically slaves in the trucks on American highways. Major, major problem. Nobody in the media is talking about it correctly, of course, because, hey, why would we make sure that Amazon has to pay a decent rate for trucks and employ actual American truckers? Anyhow, who shows up at the Mid America Truck Show this year? United States DOT Head Secretary Sean Duffy, head of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Derek Bars. Derek Bars was there for the whole 3 days of the conference talking to anybody that wanted to talk to him, right? So the truckers in America have been getting together for a couple of years now to say, hey, we have a problem on social media, in the regular media. Everyone's like trying to talk to the government and say, hey, we have this problem in the industry. Can somebody please sort this out? President Trump sends his guys directly to the biggest trucker party in the country.
Eh.
Canada, the truckers say, "Hey, this mandate is stupid. You guys don't understand. You've never provided any scientific basis or evidence for this. We've been working our butts off to keep the economy going during this national crisis, and you guys want to kick us in the ass for it. Please help." What did they do? They just crushed them, froze their bank accounts, seized their trucks, spent 4 years since pursuing a whole bunch of them with lawfare. They tried to seize this one guy, Chris Barber's truck after the fact. There's been hundreds of these cases of people nobody knows about having to go to Ottawa to face mischief charges simply for showing up at a peaceful protest. The Canadian government has spent tens of millions of dollars, court resources, lawyers' fees, ruining people's lives for taking part in a peaceful protest where they said, please talk to us about this problem. Let's get this figured out. Come to America. Trump sends his two guys. Okay, let's do it.
So who does that benefit? Does that benefit Canada? Because I saw your new prime minister talking about the new world order and how Canada and China were, very much aligned. And
Oh my God. Mark
I'm
Carney.
sorry, but after having made a documentary about the school closures and watching very closely as the teachers unions have really very successfully destroyed the fabric of this country and now still hold, all of our children hostage. I can only come to one conclusion that they're foreign agents serving another government because nothing they do benefits anyone in this country in any way. And everything you're telling me now, I mean, it's a different stage, it's a different population, it's a different country, but it's the same playbook, and it doesn't benefit your country in any way. Canada pre-COVID was, Shangri-La. Everybody dreamt of becoming a Canadian citizen, right? I mean, at least
um,
from our perspective. I'm a Soviet immigrant. My parents always talked about Canada as like this amazing country. I mean, I know you have your problems and always had, but compared to what it's become in such short order, I'm sorry, but the only thing I can see is, benefiting, foreign goals, really.
yeah, so Mark Carney, he's a special one. So he was an advisor. He was one of Trudeau's economic advisors,
Hmm.
and he wrote an opinion, an op-ed in Canada's biggest newspaper a few days before the invocation of the Emergencies Act, telling Trudeau that he should invoke the Emergencies Act and deal with these terrorist truckers, and he
Yep.
should use every tool available to clear out this protest, right?
Yep.
So Mark Carney, the current prime minister, was all up in Trudeau's business. So something again your American listeners might like to know is that Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act was taken to court. A number of like civil rights groups and individuals sued the Canadian government and said you infringed on our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, like Canada's version of the Constitution, and this is bad, and we want the courts to rule in on this. So that came down in early 2024. There was a federal court justice named Richard Mosley ruled against Trudeau and said the invocation of the Emergencies Act was unjustified, unnecessary, unreasonable, and you broke Canadian charter rights to people's like peaceable assembly, freedom of expression. Like you basically trampled everything. 12 minutes, or was it 14? It was something like 12 or 14 or 15 minutes later, the government, so this is a 2,000-page ruling from a federal court justice. The government already had an appeal locked and loaded, ready to go. They knew it was coming down. They're going to appeal it anyway. That appeal goes through the courts for 2 years. And then the appeal on the Mosley decision comes down. And the appeal says, no, it stands. You guys trampled everybody's rights. The government was in the wrong. After that appeal, the government has 60 days to do anything with it. On the 60th day after losing on that first appeal, Mark Carney's government appealed it to the Supreme Court of Canada. So we're going to be relitigating this Freedom Convoy thing until who knows when, because they don't want to be told that they were wrong.
Hmm. This is, yeah. I mean, I think that it's really, you said something about lawfare, and this country has seen its share of it. I don't know if you're familiar with, an interesting case with regard to gender and Eitan Haim in Texas, a young surgeon who blew the whistle on Texas Children's Hospital, and the fact that they were implanting puberty blockers in children as young as 11.
I
Uh,
did hear about this. Yes.
yeah, and I mean, here's another case where if President Trump had not won, Eitan would have been probably in jail for at least 10 years. The DOJ had gone after him, filed case after case after case, and it was the goal was to send a message, right? I mean, that's, everything you're telling me is the government's actions beyond, just clamping down directly on liberties, civil liberties, and on the truckers. I mean, you use the truckers to send a message to the rest of the people. Don't think about this because this will happen to you. We will come after you. And surely, your media didn't, they didn't show what was really happening, right? The piece, the positive stories.
No, never did. Yeah, the people who lost the most from all of this in Canada were the media. In 2019, they were already losing money. The internet and social
Yeah,
media and all this other alternative media. So, a group of very large media conglomerates in Canada came to the government, said, "We're losing our shirts." The Trudeau government gave them a $600 million subsidy in 2019.
wow,
That's over and above already paying for the CBC. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is a
wow,
crown corporation paid for by the taxpayers. They were already like a billion plus a year. Since 2019, they've received several top ups. And then last year, Carney announced that they were going to spend another $300 million a year on the CBC. So the CBC is a $1.5 billion a year taxpayer funded propaganda operation. All of the major media companies are effectively wards of the state. None of them reported on the Freedom Convoy accurately. And now everybody in Canada hates them who's not like a, you know, far left CBC Canadian zombie, as I call them. All right. And they, the sending a message for 4 years. Again, I'm repeating myself. The Canadian government spent tens of millions of dollars pursuing frivolous cases of mischief or intimidation against people who did nothing except show up at a protest. So the two major sort
yeah.
of big faces of the convoy, a lady named Tamara Leach and this trucker from Saskatchewan named Chris Barber. So Chris Barber and her kind of became the faces of all this. When the final sentencing came down on those two who had been convicted, they had like 8 charges each laid against them. Tamara Leach was only found guilty of mischief. Chris Barber also guilty of mischief and disobeying a court order. Right, so they were found not guilty on most of these stupid charges. The government spent fighting them like for like 3 years, longest case of mischief in Canadian history. So the sentencing comes down, they get house arrest. The judge is like, okay, you guys have had enough, but we have to give you something. So, 15 months of house arrest for you, 18 months of
Wow.
house arrest for you. Chris Barber, you're allowed to keep working because you own your own company and you have to keep on trucking. But, slap on the wrist. The Canadian government immediately, or at least in Ontario, I think this was launched by the province of Ontario, immediately files an application to seize Chris Barber's truck. His W900 Kenworth, that is the center of his business that he uses to feed his family and serve his customers. They're like, we're coming for your truck, because that truck had become a symbol of the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah.
It's in photos everywhere. It led the Western Canada Convoy into Ottawa. It's this big, beautiful red truck with the white maple leaf on the hood. It's really well taken care of. Chris is like a awesome trucker, looks after his equipment. It became this symbol, and the Canadian government wanted to crush that symbol. Like, this just shows you again about the messaging, about telling people, don't fight back. We're in charge. And they went to such lengths that they wanted to take this guy's truck and destroy it. Eventually, after months and months and months of that fight, the government was told, no, you can't take Chris Barber's truck. So the Canadian government is lost on a number of these fronts. But does the media go out and make a big deal or make any noise about that? They don't want to bite the hand that feeds.
Right. Oh, that's of course it's perfect. I mean, it's exactly like their MO, right? And crushing individual voices is the goal. And sending a message. by doing that, by choosing a couple of them is exactly the goal. And honestly, I think that the most threatening thing to these totalitarians is just ordinary people speaking out. That's, people always ask me, well, what can I do? How can I, join, the cause? And I'm like, you can speak up, you can stop self-censoring, and you can stop, worrying about what other people think about you, because those are the most, powerful actions. You can, spend time with your kids and give them the courage to do that, because, the government thinks that your kids are the most valuable commodity, but somehow you've been convinced to think that they're a waste of time, and so just that kind of messaging is so important, because you see what a threat personal action is. Small actions are large. And that's kind of what I've always tried to convey through, whatever we cover or write about, or even our documentary, that there are small voices. You don't have to have, a big capital voice. One op-ed, I sued the New York City Department of Education and the mayor to reopen the schools. Now, it was hard to find a lawyer. Most lawyers are pretty progressive, and, the firms, don't want to take cases like this. Libertarian firms refuse to take cases like this too, by the way. So,
I think on that note, I used to sort of identify myself as a very forward and out libertarian, like an ideologically driven libertarian type
mhm.
person. And what a disappointment institutional libertarianism is in America during COVID. The most prominent libertarian guy that stuck with it was a dude, Jeffrey
Tucker, yeah,
Tucker.
Jeffrey
Yeah,
Tucker, yeah,
Jeff
yeah.
Tucker was the only big name one. Reason, Cato, all the
Oh,
institutional DC libertarians, they were asleep at the wheel. Um, and on the lawyers, so I want to relay to you one more story from Canada. Um, there was these other four guys who were at one of these Freedom Convoy protest sites at the border
oh,
crossing of Coots, Alberta, and then coming into Sweetgrass, Montana. There was a protest site there. The government basically raided that place. There was accusations of, oh, there's all these guns stockpiled and they're going to cause a revolution and get violent. And they arrest 13 people. Four of those 13 guys they arrested went to jail. Two of them for 4.5 years, two for 2 years. Actually, no. How long was Tony Olien in jail? It was almost 4 years. So, like, they basically took these four guys, put them in jail. All four of these guys, regular working class people. Tony Olenek, a truck driver, ran a gravel quarry with his dad, a plumber. Chris Lysak, electrician. Jerry Morin, an electrical lineman. Chris Carbert, an independent business guy with his own landscaping business. All young, normal, working class dudes who did nothing except show up at a protest. The government concocted a conspiracy theory against them, a conspiracy to murder police officers. And when they went to jail and they applied for bail, the government denied them bail, even though no flight risk. None of them had a criminal record. They all had jobs. They all had people standing up for them. And nope, you're staying in jail. Well, it turns out that the federal justice in Alberta, one of the two justices, this lady named oh man, I forget her name now, but basically, that she denied them bail on multiple occasions, and it turns out she had donated to the Liberal Party like 27 times, and the Liberal Party of Canada, okay, 77% of the justices, right, the entire bench across the country
yeah,
are members of, appointees of, or donors to, or all three to the Liberal Party of Canada.
yeah,
It's a total the justice system in Canada is totally a political arm of something we call the Laurentian elite. There's two elite groups in Canada that are sort of the power centers in Canadian society. There's the Laurentian elite guys. That's the old power elite in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. They run the media, the government, the sort of what Curtis Yarvin calls the cathedral. A number of old school corporations. Um, and the other elite is in Alberta, uh, agriculture, oil, energy, stuff like that. And the Laurentian elite, just they are pervasive in every aspect of the management of Canadian society, and like they use the justice system against their own people to maintain that power and to send these messages.
Yeah, I mean, in this country, as you said, we have President Trump, and I always feel like, there, but for the grace of God, we would be with you as well.
He's
I
not
think
perfect either, but
I mean, I can't imagine how someone could be, and I
yeah.
imagine that, so I'm a former progressive Democrat. I had total Trump derangement syndrome when he won the first time. I was devastated. I apologized to my young daughters afterwards. I was so pompous and arrogant, and I bought everything the media said. And when he said fake media, I was just like, just so appalled. I mean, my New York Times, like, how could that be fake? And it's my whole value system, right? And through COVID, I think the silver lining and all that, and totally, I prefer not to have gone through that or put our children through it, but it definitely showed what was happening, and how we had been misled. And of course, Trump is not perfect. And I imagine, he's got his own, skeleton closet. But the president of a country, I mean, a politician who makes campaign promises in order to win an election is not going to be, Jesus.
No,
So,
no.
uh, so I'm okay with that. I don't have a
Yeah.
litmus test. It's not I don't care about his personality. Although I will tell you, I was a huge DeSantis supporter. I loved what he did in Florida. I still think he's been pretty close to perfect. There's certain things, where he's clamped down a little bit too hard, but I think overall he seems like a really good guy with a really great moral compass. But I used to be on Fox and Friends pretty regularly, here during, the last election. They would, bring in progressive Democrats to try to get them to say that they would vote for Trump. I never did. I knew it was like the kiss of death. I'd say, well, I'm going to vote for anyone but Biden. And they'd be like, what if it's Trump? And I'm like, not Biden, whatever, I wouldn't give them the sound bite, I just didn't want to give them the sound bite. But Pete Hegseth who's now our Secretary of Defense, was an anchor on it. Really very nice guy, would come backstage and talk to the guests afterwards. And I remember him talking about President Trump, who was running against DeSantis in the primary at the time, and I'd say no, 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 I'm very much pro DeSantis, and he was talking about how DeSantis did not have much of a kind of a bedside manner, wasn't really the most social, charming, enigmatic person, which I think is fine. Like he's still doing a great job, but how Trump had the best way of connecting with people and would just call people like Pete or others and just check in just because he wanted to maintain the relationship, and how much they valued that, the connections, right? And I think it's genuine, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's been able to win multiple times, and exactly why you and I are talking about like people feeling, free to express themselves. Trump is untethered. Like even sometimes it's insane, unhinged stuff. Sometimes I'm like, yes, that's our president,
Yeah. No,
So
no, he's very much got that as you put it, a connection. He's very good, got good people skills, love or hate some of the things he says. And again, I mentioned previously the truckers in America expressed a concern. He sent his guys to go and talk to us. He's during the Freedom Convoy, President Trump was very vocal in his support, those great Canadian truckers, and he sort of understood that the Canadian government went too far. Um, the Canadian government are very cold managerialists, and I think one of Trump's errors has been playing into the last election in Canada. He just sort of said some things, I think, that sort of helped with the Liberal Party's pivot away from Justin Trudeau's record to everything as president. The last election in Canada was no longer about Trudeau; it was about President Trump.
hmm
And I think, that played to the TDS in the minds of a lot of CBC Canadians. And then also, the guy, the Conservative Party guy in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, dropped the ball on that real bad, and it proved himself not to be the man of the hour. So there's blame on all sides for this. But
You think if
Carney,
Pierre Poilievre had won, Canada could, be in a better position now, or do you think the institutional powers are just too strong anyway?
I think that Poilievre would have had a very hard time, obviously, because the Laurentians are not going to go away quietly. I do think that Poilievre has got a better sense of like Canadian energy security and independence and like developing things in Alberta. Carney has done this pivot to China and pivot to the EU, which I think are bad juju for
Yep.
everybody. That's not going to work. Why pivot away from your nearest neighbor? Yeah, Trump's loud and whatever. The tariff problem needs to be resolved. That's true, but Canada and the United States have this like hundreds of years of history, good neighbors, also lengthy and prosperous trade relationship, shared security concerns. Why pivot to China? Like this Mark Carney, like we're gonna go be buddies with the CCP. And another thing the Canadian media have tried to bury or downplay that many Americans don't know is the Chinese Communist Party has been rightly found to have interfered in a bunch of Canadian elections. Like in 2019, 2021, they like interfered in the election of 20 different MPs.
Hmm.
The Canadian version of the CIA, CSIS, has found evidence that they've been interfering in Canadian politics since the Mulrooney years in the 1980s. The Chinese Communist Party is up in Canada's shit in an incredible way. There's a journalist named Sam Cooper who runs a Substack called The Bureau. He's probably Canada's best investigative journalist. He's found the Chinese Communist Party is like laundering money via triads. They're involved in the production of fentanyl in Canada and importing precursors, working with Mexican cartels, laundering money through the real estate market, which is what's just helping inflating all these home values and making it very difficult for young Canadians to buy homes. And all of this stuff is because of China. And Mark Carney is like, well, we want more of that rather than trying to, work a little bit better with the Trump administration and increase our relationship with the United States. I think that is folly and that is doomed to failure.
Why is it doomed for failure? I mean, it sounds like they're well on their way.
Well, I mean,
Failure
it's
for,
it's it's more failure for Canada, which has already
yeah.
got more problems than it can shake a stick at. And the pivot to China is just bad news. It's not going to be good for anybody.
But do people really understand? I mean, this is so complex, right? China's got its hand in everything. We have Confucius centers at schools that I think we've tried to shut down. The whole gender ideology craze, I believe is, really imported from China. It's just how they divide people. They, convince children not to have any more children. They make sure to it by performing horrific medical procedures. They are, involved in the medical world. They're involved in, everything. And Trump is not, Trump is really kind of a threat to them because this is somebody who just, he's putting America first and they're trying to, impose their will on you, on us, on the world.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, they're not I'm not. I don't think being friendly with the Chinese Communist Party is a good idea. They, they're guilty of many things. The gender stuff is insane. I mean, just having children, it's so difficult now. Like Canada's native birth rate is just like in the basement. Nobody can afford anything. There's like newspaper articles now talking about, well, what it's like to still be in your 30s and living at home, and like all these like
Oh,
families that have failed to launch. And nobody has the will or the principle to blame the policies that have brought us to this place and point to the actual guilty parties, which is the Laurentian elite in Canada who don't care about Canadians anymore.
and
Right?
meanwhile, you've got Maid, right? So
Oh,
let's just
that too. Oh my
let,
God.
so let's
Oh.
yeah, you should. Maid is what does it stand for?
Medical assistance in dying.
Oh my God. I
It's
mean,
all the slippery slopes became true of the people sounding the alarm bells off this. If your listeners are finding out more about Maid and its discontents, there's a young lady in Canada named Amanda Ackman. She runs an organization called Dying to Meet You, which is about honoring and making better the lives of senior citizens instead of just like offing them.
oh,
She would be a great guest for your show.
yes, I'd love to talk to her. That's
Highly recommend Amanda. But yeah, it's just disgusting. Like we are, hey, let's save some money on our welfare state and our medical system by just encouraging people to leave. I understand there's edge cases where like people are in like unresolvable pain and torture, and you've got some like medical condition that's terminal. I get it. There's edge cases, but this problem with MAID is that it's like now one of the leading causes of death in the country. It's an abomination.
It's one of the leading death causes for Canada now?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's like number 4, number 5 or something.
Oh my God. Well, you know, oh, look at that cutie. Oh, hi. Good morning.
Say hello, Georgia.
Hi, Georgia. It's nice
Yes.
to meet you.
Speaking of honoring life, meet Georgia.
Oh, good morning. What are you up to today, Georgia?
We're getting ready to go to her cousin River's house for his birthday party.
Oh, fun. That's awesome. That's great. And Georgia, are you 6?
Georgia, you're 6, right?
Oh,
Just turned.
cool.
She turned 6 the day my book officially released on March 24th.
Oh, wow. A newly minted 6-year-old, the
Mhm.
best age. I love it so much. Well, every age is the best age, but 6-year-olds are so fun. Georgia, I have two girls. One is 12, she just turned 12, and the other one is 15 and is about to turn 16. And that's like bordering on like adult. Like you kind of can't tell the difference sometimes. And
or
then bordering on 6 too.
yeah, or pretending to be adults, anyways.
Well, I don't want to keep you much longer. I guess my question I had really quickly is the truckers, both in the United States and Canada, would you say they skew more conservative, or
At
are they kind of all over the place?
at one time, the problem we're having now is that the industry's been going through so much transformation in the last few years, and it's downstream of all the things we've talked about and more. COVID, mass migration, just government mismanagement of everything, and right now, I hate using this word because it like uh, it triggers some people, but I think that it looks like from the evidence I can see that there's an active replacement campaign going on, displacement, replacement.
Yep.
So like right now there's something like officially it appears according to the records, which are unreliable and don't capture everything. T- right now 20% of the truckers in America are very recent migrants or immigrants or asylum seekers or refugees or illegals. I think anecdotally and from the numbers involved in the corruption of the issue of commercial driver's licenses, that number is actually more like 30, 35, maybe 40 at the outside. So basically, 1/3 of American truckers have been displaced out of their jobs and replaced with third world migration. In Canada, the same thing has been going on. It's been going on a little bit longer. It's concentrated in one migrant group. And one of the reasons that's happening is that because of economic bullcrap, right? This is like before COVID, before mass migration, before all of the like current actors making it worse. The trucking industry representative associations, corporate lobby groups, were always complaining and saying there's a shortage of truck drivers. That has never been true. What they're doing is misconstruing a retention problem because the job is hard. You're away
Mm,
from your family a long time. In many parts of the industry, it doesn't pay that well. You're exempted from being paid overtime. You're paid by the mile. The government treats you like a criminal. And it's just a hard job and it takes a certain person to do it. So a lot of people quit. And instead of trying to figure out how to make the job better or make it pay better, before all the migration stuff started, the government, or I should say, these corporate lobbyists in the United States have turned to the government to pay for training, subsidizing the training of truckers, making the standards to get a license lower in order to affect this churn model. And that churn model has become so important to the
wow.
whole business model of large segments of the industry that's how they like make their money, by offloading the costs onto the government, which is also to say offloading the costs onto everybody else, innocent motorists with more collisions and incidents from so many rookies and low skill, low trained drivers on the road, higher insurance rates for everybody else. So this whole thing has been going on for decades. Now you bring the migration thing into it, and it's just like they don't want to honor skill and craft and hard work of really good, high quality truck drivers. They want the bottom of the barrel, cheapest possible thing. And that has produced all of these results and has run into all of these other problems. Again, COVID, mass migration, just total mismanagement of the industry by the government. And, that's why I ended up writing this book, End of the Road, Inside the War on Truckers.
It's a manufactured crisis, in other words.
Yes, it's a distributed and manufactured crisis that would not have taken place if we had allowed, typical sort of market economics to work, and for the, just logic and reason. You want high skill, high quality, competent truck drivers, treat them properly, pay them well, they'll stick around. We don't have all these other problems. But that's no, the narrowing the margins on the traffic buy of corporations like Amazon and all these other big companies, every Fortune 500 company in America involved in the material economy. No, 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 no. We don't want to pay too much for trucking. So we have to have lower quality drivers by any means necessary, pass the buck to the taxpayer. Oh, well, so we have increased truck accidents and collisions and fatalities. That's a price that they're willing to pay, but they're not paying it. Everybody else is.
Well, and I know we're almost out of time, but as you were talking, it was just reminding me of what the unions have done in this country and the teaching, funnel, and how they've lowered the standards, and then you get all these teachers that are being pushed into schools from the ed schools where they're indoctrinated, and they're lowering the standards for kids, they're lowering the standards for teachers, and they say, oh, there's not enough teachers, we gotta, get more. Same with nursing, the nursing crisis, the nursing shortage. The nurses are also represented by the American Federation of Teachers in some states, definitely in New York. So they manufacture these crises, and then they, fundraise, and it becomes like this funnel, this money laundering scheme where they hire less qualified people. They're saying, we have to import them from, God knows where. And it's the same playbook in across the industries and across your country, well, the United States and Canada, and I guess beyond. So it's astonishing. I hadn't really considered trucking in that way, so I appreciate it. I think that this is like an amazing conversation. I could talk to you. I have so many more questions, but I think that we've run out of time, and I'm going to let you go and enjoy your time with your family. We will feature an excerpt from the book End of the Road, Inside the War on Truckers, which is out now. And I appreciate your voice and your time.
Thanks for having me, Natalia. I'd love to come back and expand on this more for you sometime. I hope your listeners enjoy my book. And yeah, take no crap from the media or the government. Take no crap from the liars. Aim higher, aim better. Let's have competency and skill and craft be honored. And the people that are more worried about money and margins and value scraping, we need to move past those folks.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Natalia.